these layers are all these different missions. Everybody's got a different mission, and they all start to stack up. But everybody's missions have got to mesh together.
Hey, welcome to 10X Your Team with Camden and Otis. We're a father-son leadership podcast where we talk with other lifelong learners about making an impact and solving big problems. And you know what? I think my camera ain't level. Damn it.
That's the big problem today. Oh my gosh. I thought we were going to talk about rain and heat and maybe some Jerry Jones action mentioned in the Cowboys right before we started. Oh my gosh.
Do you see it? Do you see it?
No, I see it because you got that because the bookshelf's the perfect. It's slightly well.
Damn it.
If it makes you feel better, Dad, I'll be staring at it now too. We'll both go.
Damn it. And I ain't going to be flat and stable today. I'll be off crooked all this whole show. So folks, we're going to,
you can just lean, Otis.
Yeah. Well, here's what we're going to do to our YouTube fans. We're going to award a prize if you can tell us what the degree of off is and the slope.
It's not much.
No, but you know what? If the screen was to go out 1,000 meters, think how far off it would be. That's all I got.
Perpendicular lines, tangents. Yep, I know the words.
How many times did I miss a land nav point because I drifted a degree over a 5K movement? Yeah. Welcome to the real world, folks. There ain't no GPS on your camera, and there ain't no GPS when you're using a compass. So, but there's a GPS in a helicopter, ain't there, Sean?
Oh, there is now. Absolutely.
Wait. Please tell me you weren't sitting up there in the cockpit with your Silva lens, Silva magnetic, the fancy one, right? Because of the lensetic compass, we all had them, but we didn't use them. You're flying around in a helicopter with your compass going like this, were you?
Not quite, but I'd often have the map and then the compass card on the cockpit. Hey, we need to be 030 for 42 miles. Hack.
Hack. I don't know whether I feel better knowing that or worse knowing
that. That was a long time ago. Now, yes, even in helicopters, we've got little fancy boxes and GPS, and this is where you are. The 14 decimal places.
Yeah. Well, did you cheat like the commercial pilots do and just push the autopilot button and you take a nap up there? I mean,
you can't do that in a helicopter. It doesn't fly itself that well to do that.
I know. It's every so often I'll run across something. I bet you get a lot more of them than I do. It's like, how's that thing flying? Because it's going in circles.
It's beating the air into submission.
There you go. That's probably that is, you know what? Thank you for that. That is probably the best explanation of how a helicopter works is that it's beating the air.
I was going to say from the, Dad, you have at least some engineering perspective. I have none. I look at that and it's like, how the hell is that the answer? Like that's the best way to be flying around. That doesn't. You just look at it and you learn it's again how the heck is it flying? It's just a ridiculous amount of force and just spins so freaking much that I don't see how that's the best option, but apparently it is. I trust people like Sean.
Well, I'd love what drove you into the helicopters where you're like, hey, that thing looks interesting. It looks highly dangerous, and I think I ought to try it.
Mostly my poor grades. Coming through flight school.
You're really boosting my confidence on pilot.
I'm sorry about that. Yeah, I know. And all us helicopter guys were the dumb guys, right? The smart guys were jet guys. But that's really is because in the Navy and Marine Corps, everybody does the same primary flight training, and at the end of it, you've got grades, and you can submit your requests for what you want to do, but based on the needs of the Marine Corps, needs of just like I'm sure you dealt with, the needs of the Army says you need to go here. Same thing. Some guys would get jets. Most of us would get helicopters because there's many more helicopters in the Marine Corps. And that's not to say that everybody who's flying helicopters is the bottom of the barrel, just me. But I ended up, and I was told along the way, I didn't really believe it, that you're actually going to end up in the right community with people like you, which is really, no kidding, the truth. And there's personalities in the different airframes. It's really, I was very skeptical, but it actually did kind of work out that way. Now, I got great friends who are jet guys, even the Harrier guys, who are great friends, even the Harrier guys, which now I guess is all F-35s. I mean, that's how dated I am. And in fact, my helicopter's not in the Marine Corps anymore because it got replaced by the MV-22.
Damn, you're that old? Is that what you're saying?
Compass and a map, Otis. Come on.
I was going to ask Sean, talking about, it's like you find your right home and things kind of work out in that way.
Yeah.
One of my first thoughts when you were kind of joking about, the dumb guys winding up with the helicopters, smart guys get the jets, was like, well, I wonder if there's a little bit of logic to that. Not necessarily that there was some master plan, but more so it's like, you got to do a little bit more cowboy shit, to put it bluntly. Like, it seems like there's a little bit of a difference there where it's you might not want the nerdy guy out there where you got to do some cowboy shit. Is that, and I know you're a South Carolina boy, if I got my memory right on that.
That's
so
right. That's right.
Rings true there. Okay.
Yeah. No, I like that. We used to just say that, hey, look, the jet guys, they got 400 knot brains. I got 100 knot brain. I can only process things so fast. The problem is we're also only 400 feet off the ground, so we only got a couple of seconds to figure it out, whereas they're 30,000 feet,
So
they're not gliding real far, but
you just gave me the flashback on a reaction test I had to do. I think it was basic training.
Yeah,
I think it was, and I failed it miserably. It was the peg thing. Did you have to do this?
The peg drops?
So you had no. So you had two sheets or one big sheet of paper, divided left and right, and it had these circles on it. And the drill sergeant would say go, and what you had in your hand was wood, and then just a metal rod or whatever rounded on the end, and underneath the sheet was the carbon paper.
Okay.
So it was a timed event, and you had to hit all these circles going up the sheet. And I don't think I hit a single one. It was timed, so it was all about peripheral vision and reaction time and all this sort of stuff. Y'all didn't do that?
Really?
Damn, you really are dropping. I'm glad I'm not flying around in the back of helicopters anymore.
That sounds too hard for helicopter guys, Otis.
That eye-hand coordination. I don't know if I hit any of them little circles.
Well, I'll tell you, eye-hand coordination to hover the helicopter is the magic skill. If you can't hover, you can't fly a helicopter, basically. And it takes a combination of feet and both hands to make the right control inputs to not be doing this all over the place. And it takes a little longer for that light bulb to come on for some people.
Could you dive a bit more into some of those other examples like that? Like we were kind of talking of the difference of pilots there, for civilians, y'all are all kind of the same. We're kind of teasing it out more, which is very interesting for me. Thank you. But I would love to hear more of it's like, what do you think is different about that skill set? Kind of like we were joking, if it's like got a little bit more stupid cowboy in you, how does that play into things? Like, all that.
Oh, okay. I think helicopter pilots tend to be anticipators of disaster. Because we are beating the air in submission, into submission, and we only have, we're often operating 500 feet and below. We're always on the lookout for the next place to land. I don't mean the next airport. I mean, if the transmission fails, if the engine fails, if I have a mechanical problem and I have to land, according to the regulations, if I have to land as soon as possible, am I going in that farmer's field or in that parking lot or on that road? And so you're always scanning out front. And there's one guy who's always flying with his hands on the controls, and the other guy, and he's looking, everybody's looking. So that's probably one example, whereas the fixed wing pilots, like Otis was saying, they can hit the autopilot and they can kind of just wake me up on the other end type thing. And I had helicopter buddies who did flying tours, flying fixed wing aircraft, who said they found themselves bored because they'd take off. They had the controls, they'd take off, but then they'd climb the altitude, they'd hit the autopilot, and they'd break out the newspaper. Well, okay, so now I'm dating myself again. They'd actually break out the newspaper until they get to the other end, and they turn the autopilot off, and if they wanted to, they could do the landing. So I think there's a difference in a mindset of being always being anticipatory of what next bad thing is going to happen. More as a helicopter guy than a jet guy. There are things we have to deal with a little faster than jet guys have to, but there's a lot of problems jet guys have that we don't have to worry about. In many cases, landing on the ship, an angled deck is very different when you're flying an F-18 or an E-2C or something like that than it is a helicopter. Not that it's harder or easier, but it's different. And it takes a steady hand and some steady nerves. Actually, one more that comes to mind, Cam, is in the Marine Corps anyway, and I don't know to what extent this would be true in the Army, because I know their aviation force is basically the Air Force minus the helicopters. As helicopter pilots, aviators, we do a lot of planning and interaction with the infantry and the ground forces because they're getting in our helicopters and we have to put them in the right spot, whether we're landing, we're going to the rooftop and they're fast roping, or we're flying over a jump zone and they're drop zone and they're jumping out. But it takes a lot of coordination and throughout the course of a deployment or a training workup cycle or whatever the case may be, you develop relationships with those guys over time that the fixed wing guys, the C-130 folks, the Hornets, the Harriers, they don't develop that same sort of relationship just because of the time-space difference in what they do.
So how does, what have you found how this thought process, because we've talked about a very similar thought process from my Green Beret time. We always talk about PACE, primary, alternate, contingency, emergency. And you're flying around in the helicopter with that mindset of when's it going to break, so I have to be prepared to land. A similar sort of mindset. How have you found that translates into business for you and working in the much slower and less dangerous world of business?
Yes, yeah. I always got an alternate and a tertiary plan. I mean, we're just conditioned to think that way. Hey, this is the path I'm walking down today. This is my preferred angle of attack, if you will. But if it doesn't work, where am I going to peel off? What's the criteria to decide I'm going to peel off and investigate, explore the alternate, or the emergent, or the contingency, or the emergency, whatever the case may be? What's that criteria? What's the tripwire? And not just the tripwire, not just the thing that makes me do it, but what are the conditions where I may second guess and delay and adjust that judgment I made before we stepped off, that, you know what, we just hit that tripwire, but I got a real good feeling about. So I'm going to press farther than I said we were going to. So setting things like tripwires, go no go criteria, and even in the consulting world, like a solicitations release from the government. I want to compete for that work. Well, I got to take a look at it. I got to decide if that's the sort of thing we do. Is that the sort of thing I want to do? What's the point in pursuing it? What does it mean for me? And then I make a go, we make a go, no go decision. Let's press or not. Does it look like it's wired for somebody else to win it? So I think all those sorts of milestones, tripwires, criteria along the way, you bring to the business world to make your decisions as well. I always feel better with a backup plan.
Mm-hmm. I want to jump on something. This is probably one of our favorite subjects here on this show.
Sure.
And the sunk cost fallacy, because it's a really interesting, you said something that really made me think, as a pilot, the margin, the consequences of the error can be significant, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But in the pilot, there is a bit of self-confidence in that, push through it sort of thing.
Yeah.
You can say stupid cowboy. We already use that term.
Yeah. I mean, well, there is. I mean, but it's
a powerful skill. I'm saying that is a powerful skill. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah. Well, it's the scrum half, right? It's the cocky little shit that gets in your face. As many pilots tend to be, like, I got this. And that sunk cost fallacy is that confidence of I got this. Could you talk a little bit about that in the cockpit and then translate it into I've got a plan, but let's push this more.
Yeah. I like that comparison, that analogy. And my son, by the way, as an aside, two of my boys are rugby players, and one's a fly half, one's a scrum half. So I get it.
You know which one's the scrum half, right?
Sunk cost fallacy. What's this? It's a what it's going to cost me, and is it worth it? And do I have the gumption, and is it wise enough to proceed? I think those are kind of four little pieces here. And there's a big difference in, is it wise? Is it a good idea? Balanced with, am I willing to do this? Do I have the cojones to keep pushing what could potentially be a bad situation? And yes, you find yourself in that. You find yourself in that a lot, and unfortunately, you put yourself there sometimes. In the helicopter, it may be, hey, we got 30 miles to go to get across those next two mountain ranges to the airfield. The gas says, I've got 31 miles I can go. Right? What's the wind doing to us? What's the weather look like? What's our fuel burn been? Are we burning more? In other words, can we do? Okay, so technically we can do it, but do I really have the gumption? Do I really have is it worth it to do it? And that's when you start weighing the odds of, okay, if I make it, great. What happens? The crew all lands. Everybody lives. We tie up the helicopter. Everybody gets to go home tonight on time. If I don't make it, what happens? I end up landing in some farmer's field, a parking lot, a park, potentially damaging the aircraft, bringing discredit on the Marine Corps, maybe messing up somebody's property, inconveniencing a tremendous amount of Marines and local law enforcement to launch a recovery operation, when really, I put myself in this bad situation voluntarily. And I think I've brought that now, and I think we all bring some of that to our business decisions and say, yeah, I can press and getting to the other end will be fantastic. But is success worth either the cost or the potential damage caused by it not working out? How's that?
Yeah, I think that's a great way of thinking about it. And
I got one on that I would want to go if you can.
Go ahead. My follow on is kind of the same, but we'll go ahead, Cam.
Yeah, we'll see. We can try our luck. We're pretty good at this. So yours will definitely be a natural segue from mine because we're great at this. The thing that came to mind talking about the difference of your examples talk about flying the helicopters in a mission, talk about landing, all these different aspects that you're calculating there. The thing that comes to mind to me, and it's of course the business world is less stressful. There's less chaos, all those kind of things, but it's overlapping missions is the thing that's kind of unique to me in the business world that I've seen, where it's like you have all these different things going on at once. So it's less like, okay, this helicopter right now going to this spot. It's more, I got 15 helicopters. Some of them might not need to move for months. Some of them might need to move right now. Some of them should have left yesterday. It's like you got all these different things that are kind of layered on top of each other. I would love to hear your thoughts on kind of teasing those out for not just, hey, and this mission doesn't make sense, but is this the right mission for me to pick between all 15 of these?
Ooh. Let's use the analogy then of we'd call it the big mish. So we are launching a flight of helicopters to insert the grunts on the objective. So transport helicopters that they fly in, attack helicopters that provide fire support, perhaps a command and control aircraft, plus some fixed wing overhead that are providing both radio relay, fixed wing casts, close air support if necessary, eyes on above us, airborne recce. So these layers are all these different missions. Everybody's got a different mission, and they all start to stack up. But everybody's missions have got to mesh together as we build those layers you're talking about. And everybody has responsibilities, and everybody knows their piece of the pie and their piece of the puzzle, and we plan it together, and we brief it together, and we brief the contingencies so that the air mission commander, who's the one in charge of all of them, knows who he's talking to, who he's delegating things to, and how to start separating and breaking off those layers when things start to go wrong, because inevitably something's going to go wrong. It's not always going to work. And I think it's pretty similar when you're building a spend plan and you're building, well, let's back up to building your revenue goals for the year, perhaps. Your spend plan, building your sales pipeline. What do you really need to achieve those goals? How did you come up with those goals? How did you decide that, 1.1 million this year is really the goal you need? And you're not just saying that, right? What's it really going to take to get you there based on previous experience and what you understand the market to be in the future? Layer. And you realize sometimes I may need some help. I may need a marketing consultant. I may need to get real smart on AI. I may need, and each one of those then becomes a capability and a layer. And it's all got to work together. And you got to, just as the air mission commander has to realize, hey, the Cobras are going to be late, or the Huey didn't get off the deck, so I don't have command and control. I know Otis is laughing at that. I'm sure he's heard that before. So
maybe you've witnessed it once or twice.
You were probably supposed to be in it. So I just lost a layer. I just lost an element, and I have to adjust the plan. And I think it doesn't matter if you're flying helicopters or what you're doing in the military and what you're doing in business. You always have to be adjusting your plan, and you got to be flexible enough to take that off ramp when it presents itself, and to stick to your conviction previously that when I hit that tripwire, that means do this.
All right, that's easy, right? Because we're talking about, no, seriously. And the reason I'm saying here, I'm going to throw something at you that's the hard, because the three of us are like, oh, hell yeah. I mean, pace. Camden's heard me say pace enough that he believes in pace, and he knows that. But when you're dealing with clients,
oh yeah,
how do you convince that client that's like, hey, Joe, hey, man, you really ought to take some time, whether it's pace or emergency plans or backup or continuity of operations, whatever label you put on it, right? Getting a client, I'd love to hear your perspective on getting a client to say, hey, let's just maybe spend a little bit of time, maybe invest a little bit in some contingency planning.
Yeah. I think if you paint the picture of the worst thing that could happen, and maybe not even the worst, maybe just kind of bad, maybe even just less than desirable, or anything other than what they think they're going to get out of it. Because I often find they haven't done any of the PACE planning. They haven't even considered it. They've decided, I want 42% of the market share in my state, in my whatever, and I'm going for it. Okay, well, sure, great. I applaud your enthusiasm, but what's that going to cost you? And let's start backing up from there. And I think if you help them come to the conclusion themselves that it might be a good idea to consider some other options, to consider, you'll get this, supporting fires.
Mm.
Okay, what supporting fires do I need to enable this maneuver, to enable this mission to be successful? What's that going to cost me? Do I have the time? How do I sort through who that is I should get some help from? So you're building that mission package and you're pulling it all together after they've acknowledged that, yeah, maybe my idea of just slinging it over my shoulder and going for it isn't going to work. But until they see that it could go bad and it could go really bad, and painting that picture, lots of times they're not willing to entertain it.
The logic that I think I hear from people all the time in that kind of a camp that don't want to open themselves up to the contingencies is this, and I think there's really good logic here. I think also it's definitely not one size fits all, but it's this whole idea of it's like, well, Sean, if I write out all these contingencies, I'm opening myself up to the idea of failure. We don't want to plan for failure. All we're going to do is succeed, and I'm just 100% visualizing success, and that helps my mindset, which means I will succeed. And if I think about this thing over here, then that's going to open me up to failure, and I'm going to have these problems. Now, as I'm even walking through and acting that out, it makes me think of what you're talking about with the helicopters, and of course, looking for that landing point all the time. So clearly, you're pretty opposed to that logic. I would love to hear your thoughts on it, though.
Yeah. I like that question. I had never in my life considered I was going to be an entrepreneur. Mm-hmm. And then when I became one, I realized that many of these people who hammer away at, nothing but positive thinking, 100%, burn the boats.
Yep.
Who was it? Cortez, right? Burn the boats. Yep. That's just not the way I think. And the people who tend to purport that attitude have met with tremendous success. Mm-hmm. So they are able to say that, right? They're the Tony Robbins, the Ray Dalios, those guys who are sitting on top of the pile and can say those things.
Mm-hmm. Well, I
think
I just want to interject because I think it was this week's newsletter actually wrote, Dumb and Dumber. You're saying there's a chance. Because there is a chance. There is a chance.
Oh, sure. Right? Oh, sure. Yeah. Oh, no, absolutely. Absolutely. There's I've forgotten that.
And I'll add, and actually adding a layer on that, the thing that's so interesting, and it's why you can look at somebody, you can say they're successful, and you can learn from them, of course, but why you need to be careful just putting all folks that have that success on the pedestal is because depending on the type of work they're doing, a lot of the times it is just that there's a chance, and they just keep getting it and getting it and getting it. And we're like, oh my God, this guy's a genius. It's like, no, he just kept gambling, and he got it right 6 times, and it was amazing. Like there's this layer to that too, which is why I think we would all say you have to have some contingency plans and whatnot. But to those folks, it's like, just keep going for the big win. If you keep getting it, why stop?
Yeah. I think there's people who get one win and it fuels their enthusiasm and their willingness to tackle that second win.
Yeah.
To go after the next one. You're right. Because when you get one, now, hey, the endorphins, the adrenaline, the press coverage, everybody slapping you on the back. That felt really good. If I doubled this one, what would that look like? There's certainly an element of mindset to that. And one of the guys I used to fly with, as a nice way to say that not everybody's cut out to do what we do, he would say, Sean, a man's got to know his limitations. And I've taken that on board, sometimes as an excuse, sometimes as a rationalization. But I think if you're not wired in that 100 miles an hour, full speed ahead, put your head down, and I'm going for it, and the consequences be damned. Are you willing to deal with the fallout and the carnage that may result when you do achieve what you're looking for? It's I don't know, it's kind of a cats in the cradle thing. I mean, I can't even listen to Harry Chapin Cats in the Cradle anymore. It's just too sad as a dad. But, what'd that guy do? He did everything he thought he was supposed to be doing. And what'd he get at the end? Nothing. His son doesn't even have time to come over to his house and see him, and I think that is just not worth the cost. Yeah. Put your head down. You can go for it. And then what are you going to do? What are you going to do on the other end when you got it? Mm-hmm. Is it really going to be that great?
Yeah. Well, I think the smart thing is, you put your head down and you go, but you're recognizing indicators and collecting the data and those, to get those indicators and building up the decision points, like you talked about earlier, and admitting, because that's the other thing I think happens with those kind of folks that, they want one big one or a couple. They forget about all the shit they did that they screwed up. And they're like, look how smart I am because I got this right. Therefore, this is going to be great. The classic new Coke, the gazillion
one-hit wonders we talked about, the same kind of thing.
Well, I mean, you could even talk about our good friend Zuck. How many things has Zuckerberg screwed up, but he still has this air of confidence. I think he's toned it down with some maturity. In the cowboy-esque, he was that fly by the seat of your pants sort of guy that got it right. Well, yeah, but you wear out them britches. And if you don't figure out what to do, you're going to be hurting.
That brings to mind something that I think would be a really interesting thing for us to discuss, which is talking about, I kind of use the analogy of it's like you're betting and we look at these guys as heroes, but it's like in reality, they just got lucky 6 times in a row and that kind of thing, right? A lot of the time that is what that success looks like. And of course, there's a lot that goes into luck. I'm oversimplifying. But in that like kind of gambling metaphor, I was thinking, well, how do you be smart with it? Well, don't bet more than you're willing to lose, those kind of things, right? Well, what an entrepreneur would say, because I heard this entrepreneur voice pop up in my head when I was thinking about this question, was, well, I'm not gambling, Sean. I'm betting on myself. I am the safest bet because I can control it. I can work. There's a lot of logic there. What are your thoughts on that? Because that's really true. But then again, if you're cashing out the 401k into yourself on one business, probably not very smart. So what are your thoughts there? How do you kind of balance those two? Because I think there's really good logic with it.
Yeah. How do I balance I'm betting on myself, so I'm willing to bear the consequences.
Exactly. And then that can kind of encourage you to take a little bit too much risk maybe, or bet too heavily, or however you want to take that.
Yeah. From my own personal experience, it's cyclical. So there are times and periods in my life and my family development where I was more willing to take risk than I was at other times. I'm an empty nester now. I'm willing to take a little more risk than I was when I had 4 kids at home, all the time, every day. I'm more willing to bet on myself now than I was then. And I think that's, in a way, that's a bit of an excuse because that seems pretty obvious. But at the same time, I've also gained a lot of life experience over that path. And the more life experience you gain, I think most of us become more comfortable taking some of those risks you're talking about.
It's a better bet.
And I'll bet on myself. It's a better bet. Exactly. And yeah, we all want the better than 50%. But I think that everybody does have to temper it with a bit of introspection. And if I'm willing to bet on myself now, would I have been willing to bet on myself previously? And if not, why not? If I can answer that question and feel confident in it now, okay, I'll go for it. But yeah, I hate to think that in some of those previous situations I was in, the only difference in success and failure was me saying, I'm betting on myself. If I'm the only one who's going to reap the damage or the benefits, then it's an easy bet. When there's collateral damage as a potential, I'm less than willing to bet just on myself. I like to be really sure of myself. That's a bit of a limiting feature. I think a lot of really great entrepreneurs are willing to do things both because they're blind to some of the risks and they think they can overcome what is going to happen. I like to be real sure. I like to have done the research. I like to have had a rehearsal. I like to be, run it by somebody else before I step off on any of that, because I'm just not confident that I'm bringing everything that I need without doing all of that preliminary steps. So betting on myself, I'm always a little cautious.
I think the layer I would add, and I think it's interesting, Sean, talking about like the would you bet on yourself the 3 years ago and those kind of things and what's changed. And I love that question. But what comes to mind for me is I think we as entrepreneurs confuse betting with ourselves with betting on the business. Like I'm betting on myself as the CEO of this business, but if I'm putting all my eggs in this basket, that's a business. That's not me. And it's like I can keep going and I can find success, but it's like, yeah, but if you just lost $1 million, it's gone. That doesn't just magically get to keep going with you to the next business. You lost it on this one. So that was one layer I wanted to add. Dad, you go ahead on that though.
Well, I want to add on to that because I know people who have done that. I've built a business up to 10 mil in revenue, and then made a mistake or hedged my bets and filed bankruptcy. But because they know that, they walk into a situation with that confidence. I've done it once, I can do it again. And back to that betting on yourself, not in a the ones I'm referring to, not in a higher risk acceptance, but in a sense of, well, that sucked. Now I've got to do it again. I never saw that it came out. I think it was Grant Cardone was dropped off in Pueblo, Colorado, and said, make $1 million was like the show or something like that. And he knew nobody and nobody knew him. And he did it like in 90 days or whatever it was. And it's because he had the steps in his head. And I think it's one of those situations where if you know the steps and can survive.
He's not betting on himself. He's betting on his system that he's built and proven.
Yeah, the improvement in it. Exactly. I can't help but agree there, Otis. I actually have a good friend who has built very successful business, lost it all, built it again, lost it. He's declared bankruptcy 4 times.
Oh shit.
And you know what?
On him.
He always comes out of it smelling like a rose somehow. He knows the drill. He knows the attorney to call. He knows that, right? Because he's learned over time how to do it. And he's come out of it each time.
That's almost
I would panic if I had to declare bankruptcy. But I think that's what you're saying. I mean, how many billionaires have made $1 million, lost $1 million, made $5 million, lost $2 million, right? I mean, it's an up and down thing. And you gain confidence and experience, and a willingness, Cam, to bet on yourself as you figure it out.
All right. Well, I got to throw this out there because this is what popped into my head. That's like I've got a divorce lawyer on speed dial. So I just had a fight with my wife. We're getting a divorce. I mean, that's what that dude feels like. I mean, how many times have you been married?
Yeah. Well, that one at least he's doing pretty good on. He's only on one on that. But
okay, good.
Yeah, good point. Good point.
I'm like, how the hell you tease those two out, and he's not here for us to psychoanalyze? But
yeah, we need to have him on the show because that's to me, it's almost back to that the indicators and believing the indicators and the sunk cost fallacy, which I think is as humans one of our biggest weaknesses. But it's also kind of like is it too easy to pull here's your and got one of these in a helicopter, but in a jet, pulling that eject, reaching up there and or from my world, it's the pulling the
reserve
away the chute and pulling the reserve.
I'm celebrating over here because that's really what we were talking about earlier of does having the plan for failure make you more susceptible to failure? It's like it does if you're resting your freaking hand on that button. Like that might mess up your performance a little bit. But yeah, Sean, what are your thoughts on that? That's interesting.
Yeah. I always wondered how bad it's got to be to cut away. I was never a paratrooper, but I'd send plenty of those guys out the back, and I'm thinking, I sure am glad I'm circling down the land. But they seem to have no trouble.
Had to, so thank God I never had to.
Is that right?
I've known a lot of people who have. Yeah.
Yeah. There's absolutely something to be said for that balance between feeling confident enough in your plan and your backups to proceed versus, it's getting a little dicey, I'm just going to bail out. And I think that's one of those things those decision points are predicated on not just the plan and where you're going, but all sorts of environmental factors. What's going on at home in your personal life, for instance, market conditions, other things that perhaps you didn't have access to previously that maybe change the picture. And I'm going to hit that button now when maybe I wouldn't have hit that button before. But I'd always feel better about having the extra backup, having thought through those things before I step off rather than just stepping off. I just can't imagine those two not coexisting in my head anyway.
And I was going to say, Dad, it's just like what we were talking about with General Fuller talking about pace. The whole idea of what I'm demonstrating with my analogy there is the problem I have with planning, which is I skip A and C and go, oh, shit, pull the button. And so that's really what that is. And that's what Les is talking about, of the, you got to make sure you understand each of those contingencies so that you don't just jump to E and, pull the E-brake or whatever the heck it is.
Well, and I have to wonder back to the difference between a rotary wing and a jet.
Oh yeah,
you ain't got no eject button. Your eject button is the auto rotate and ride that bitch in, isn't
it? Yeah, which is not a great plan, by the way.
No, it's not.
It's really not. I mean, it would work, but you got to know what you're doing. Part of the problem is once you get out of the training command, you really only practice doing it when you've got a runway right in front of you, right? Because you're practicing complete failure. Nobody's really probably going to walk away completely unscathed and undamaged. But yeah, we don't have that option. Yet I got buddies who ejected, and that's no party either.
Yeah.
Do
you think there's a ingrained deep, because it's not something that you think of consciously, but do you think that has any effect on business decisions growing up that way, that hey, the only option I've got is to ride this bitch in versus man, when it gets really bad, I'm cutting away, I'm ejected?
Yeah, sure. Because I think that's part of the way we are wired. Like I said, that the helicopter guys tend to end up in the right helicopter, not just helicopters, but in the right helicopter. The jet guys tend to end up in the right aircraft just because it matches in a way something about their personality and the way they're wired. And I think that absolutely does translate to the business world, because you get so inculcated in repetitively reinforcing that mindset, those attitudes, those tendencies. To completely discount that almost seems like psychologically impossible. And I'm no psychologist, but we tend to return to the things with which we have experience and are comfortable. And so if we're used to being, Mach 2.4 with our hair on fire, upside down, okay, that's one way to live. And it's something else to be going 120 knots, 50 feet over the trees, hoping that your co-pilot is tracking where all the power lines are on the map. Because that could be really, really bad. And to step away from each of those and completely change the way you go about doing things, I can't picture this. I entered entrepreneurship very much, and I didn't say it until I was about a year into it. You know what? This is not my dream. I'm not going to mortgage my retirement and my kids' college so that I can make it as an entrepreneur. If things don't look like they're coming together, then I'm going to exercise a different plan. And I did exactly what I mentioned before, Cam. I moved that tripwire, that red line, farther out. Okay, it's October. No, now it's December. Okay, now it's the second quarter of the next year, because the morsels start happening. You find a couple of those nuggets and you adjust the plan. But to completely discount all that, Otis, from what you grow up with and what you reinforce, I don't think many people can really do that. I know I couldn't, at least.
All right. Well,
I would say it's not smart either. To your point, it's like kind of play with the system you got a bit, and you can modify and keep getting better. But it's like, it doesn't really make sense to go tear it all the way down to the foundation.
Yeah, well, you're not relying on your strengths then, right?
Yeah, there you go.
Well, and speaking of strengths, who makes a better entrepreneur, a jet driver or a helicopter pilot?
Ooh.
If you want to mention people's names, go ahead.
Is it?
Yeah.
Well, actually, one guy comes to mind who's a good friend of mine. He's a jet guy. And he runs a government consulting firm, and he's grown it from, he's been very successful, and he's right here in D.C., and he hires a lot of Marines, but he's built a very successful company that when I first talked to him when I was retiring back in 2014, he had a pretty high profile job at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. And he said, hey, I'm going to step out of this pretty soon. And he was laying the foundation for his plan. And he's a jet guy, and he's plowed right straight ahead. I think one thing that jet guys bring that the helicopter guys don't is if you're sitting, particularly if you're a carrier aviator jet guy, man, you're sitting in that catapult. You push that throttle forward, and that catapult engages. There's no turning around. You can't say, no, I changed my mind in the middle, right? I mean, you're going.
Yeah.
So at the very least, I think jet guys are great starters in entrepreneurship. Do they persevere as well? I don't know. I think helicopter guys tend to plod along better. A jet guy launches and he burns an hour of fuel, and he's got to either hit the tanker or come back to the ship or land. We're going to put 3 hours of gas in there, and we're going to keep going until it's time to land because we have to. And we just understand that's how it works. You keep going, one foot in front of the other, one more pass of the rotor system, because it is a wing, actually, Cam. It functions as a wing. That's about as close as I can come. I never thought of the cat shot analogy, but maybe jet guys are really good starters and helicopter guys are better finishers.
Yeah, that's an interesting way of putting it, because what comes to mind on my side of the or my end of the aircraft, I guess, is the PONR, the point of no return. That jet pilot, he does that at the carrier. When he hits the gas in that catapult, there's no point of no. He's already hit the point of no return, right? Whereas helicopter guys like me, we're going a little bit further down the road to get
down the path, right?
Yeah. Well, and that just makes me think of the fun metaphors that we had today, and going back to that sunk cost fallacy, and making the decision to eject, or cut away. And it comes down to that understanding of the indicators, the data that you collect to give you the indicators. And the thing that I always flash back to is as a kid, when Dr. McGregor was doing the YF-16, or maybe it was the X-16 at out in California. I just drew a blank on the base, Edwards, at Edwards Air Force Base. And the test pilot, who my dad still says is the best pilot he's ever seen in all his entire life, when he hit eject at about 20 feet off the ground because the engine shut off, and he kept trying to restart it. And, you think about the kind of experience that went into that, and how he kept pushing it to the very, very edge to save the aircraft, because that's what he was concerned about, save the aircraft as a test pilot. And, hitting, I always imagine he's just in there, that red start button,
over and over.
start. But he had that wealth of experience to collect all the data to get to those decision points, and said, all right, hey, Bob, this is it. Pull. And last, just unbelievable. And you think about the wealth and the risk acceptance to get to that point.
Despite all the indicators and warnings telling him to get out.
Yeah.
Right? Everybody else would be gone by this point.
And I think he was 50 something at the time.
Oh,
we're talking a test pilot, long retired from the Air Force, flying jets, Chuck Yeager sort of dude.
Wow.
Yeah. Amazing.
Did he survive?
Oh, yeah.
Did he? Okay.
Yeah, I don't even think he got hurt. Got up, walked away, said, God damn it, sorry, guys.
Left that smoking hole at the end of the runway. Well, that's what literally test pilots are paid for, is to test the limits of the graph, the limits of the aircraft performance. Hey, we know today we're approaching max ord of whatever. Can we go just a little farther? Can we take it just a little farther? What happens if we pull, 8.5 instead of 8.25 Gs?
Yeah.
You can have that. Yeah. You can have all that, fellas. I'm not into that.
Camden, how about you? What'd you learn?
Yeah, for me, I think it was interesting talking about, again, same kind of thing, the sunk cost fallacy, taking risk, all that different stuff, betting on yourself. I guess I hadn't thought too much about how much the survivor bias plays into entrepreneurs, and how it's like, you look at all these big folks, it's like, wow, they did all these great things. And it's like, you don't think about all of the people who did the exact same thing and failed along the way. Like, we talk about grit, and grit is super important. I don't think this devalues it, but I think it's an important, aspect to understand. Like, grit and pushing forward and persistence and all that kind of stuff. It's like, there's plenty of people who persisted their way into an early grave. Like, there's plenty of people who persisted their way into the poorhouse. Like, it's not always just that. And I think when we look at the people who are really successful, one, we ignore all the luck and the things that go into it, the preparation and all the hard work. But two, I think we tend to just look at the oversimplified story of it. And I don't think that's a fair story to tell an entrepreneur who's trying to set out on that journey, because then you can set yourself up for failure. Grit's super important, but if grit is all you have, I don't know if that's a great path forward.
Yeah. Sean, how about you, man? What'd you learn?
I've never actually heard the acronym PACE applied. And that's kind of low hanging fruit, but that's my number one thing.
Yeah.
Primary, alternate, contingency, emergency. I mean, how fast can you say that? And I don't even know.
It weigh a lot when you put it in your rucksack. I can just tell you that.
Yeah, I bet. And we would always, in the real formal planning world, staff planning world, we'd say, look, for every contingency, every other course of action you develop, you got to develop a whole branch plan. Well, that would kind of keep us from developing too many courses of action, because gosh, I don't want to build a whole plan separately. But PACE is absolutely, I'd never really put a name on what it is that we do, and yet we just do it all the time. What I'm now going to weigh is, yeah, it's emergency. It's the last one in the list. To what extent is that plan developed compared to the alternate or the contingency? I bet it's 2 steps, and that's it.
Yeah. Well,
Dad, can I add what I learned? Because it doesn't seem like the Marines are reading the books y'all keep sending over to them.
Yeah.
Y'all wrote that PACE book about 100 years ago, I bet.
I've never heard that acronym. COOP, continuity of operations, primary, alternate, tertiary. We can go on and on, but that I like that. I like that.
It was a guerrilla warfare or unconventional warfare thing we came up with. Probably. Right? I think it really originated the concept with the OSS in World War II.
Oh, okay. Even so, but applying that, what you guys did today that I've never really had a conversation about how that helicopter guy mentality translates to how I approach business. I think I've always talked around it, and I've made little examples, but I never directly kind of put them, juxtaposed them head to head. It's like there's a book in there, maybe.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Awesome. Sean, been a lot of fun hanging out with you today. How do folks get to know you, find out what you got going on?
Yeah. They can find me on my website, Sean, SEAN, at knighthawkconsulting.com. And that's Nighthawk with a K. KNIGHT consulting.com. They can find me on LinkedIn. There's several Sean Quigleys on there, which I was surprised when I looked one time. Goodness gracious.
Must be your Irish heritage, huh?
I guess so. But they can find me there. Much of what I post is experiences from aviation and my military background and lessons that I learned and have now tried to convey and reinforce based on screwing things up when I was a younger buck, and then maybe not so young anymore as well. But both my website, and they can, if they want to come directly to me, Sean at, nighthawkconsulting.com is the website address. Sean at nighthawkconsulting.com is my email. Sorry about that.
All right. Well, next time you get out the crayons and write that shit down.
I'm into markers lately because I can just wipe them off.
Awesome, Sean.
I can't believe we went an hour with only one crayon joke.
I know. I had to wait to the end. We're gracious hosts, and
you guys are. You guys are. I appreciate it.
Hey, Sean. Thanks again, man, for hanging out with us today and having some fun. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, glad to do it. Thanks for having me, guys. I enjoyed it.
Camden, run us out.
All right. Thank you all for listening to today's episode of 10X, Your Team with Camden and Otis. And a special thanks to our guest, Sean Quigley, for joining us today. Remember, you can watch full episodes of the show on YouTube at 10X, Your Team. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please make sure to pass it along to other lifelong learners in your tribe so they can enjoy it too. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. As always, that full archive of episodes available at www.10xteam.net. Thanks again. We'll see y'all next time.